All right, so let's take a moment to talk about Wi-Fi security issues. Now, first off, we mentioned that it is open air. Wireless networks emit radio waves that go beyond the physical barriers, right? So you have physical security in your environment. You have a locking front door. You may have multiple locking doors in your environment to keep people out of your local area network. But once you introduce a wireless network into your environment, we have radio waves that go beyond those locked doors. Those radio waves do not respect the locked door at all. That signal may bleed outside of your building. This is why we have to come up with several ways to protect ourselves from attacks. Now, this also leads to silent attacks. No alarms are going to go off if someone accesses your radio signal outside of your physical boundaries, right? So it's a little harder to track down when someone's seeping in and piggybacking, so to speak, on your radio waves. Now, first off, we have some of the standards that we're going to use. The standard is 802.11 protocol. This is a very well documented and well understood wireless protocol, right? Now, this is because it's so well documented and so well understood, lots of people know how to attack the 802.11 protocol. 802.11, yeah, everybody's kind of aware of how it works. So these management frames, the frames that are used just to get connectivity between your client and your wireless access point, they're so well understood that they're easily targeted. There's lots of ways to get in there and cause problems. Now, another issue with wireless is because it uses unlicensed wavelengths. We've talked about wavelengths in Module 1 if you need to review that. But unlicensed wavelengths, these wavelengths are easy to access. It's inexpensive technology. You don't need a lot of power to push out these wavelengths. So there's lots of ways to capture these radio signals, to generate your own radio signals. A lot of different issues can rise up from this wireless technology. Because we have radio waves just out in the open, guess what? That means that other people could do something like radio frequency jamming, where they're actually putting out a signal intentionally to jam your signal or to erase your signal. We'll talk more about that later, but that's an attack that could happen. Another thing, a lot of people think by hiding their SSID broadcast that they're safe. No one can see my network because I hid my SSID. That's not necessarily true either. People can use the response from clients in order to gain access to the SSID. So there's ways around what many people believe are safe configurations within their wireless protocol, which we're going to talk about a little later. So we talked about RF jamming, we talked about SSID, hiding your SSID, and how that's not necessarily as safe as you think it is. There's also the man-in-the-middle attack. Somebody brings in a wireless device, pretending to be a wireless device in your environment. Your users connect to it, and now they're acting as a man in the middle. They're taking the information that's coming in, authentication, all of that jazz, and logging it and then passing the traffic on. This is definitely a very silent attack. Nobody is aware of it until after the fact, right? Your clients have to connect to it first before everybody becomes aware that this is happening. Another thing that can happen is people say, well, that can't happen in my environment. These attacks can't happen. I hide my SSID and I use MAC address. I use specific MAC addresses. Well, there's address spoofing, right? A rogue device can come in and pretend to be a device in your environment just simply by monitoring the communications that's taking place back and forth between a wireless client and the wireless access point. This can happen and has happened in the past. It's because we are traveling in the air. This is open air, right? So every signal I send is going through the air. It's not just going directly to the wireless access point we're talking about. It goes throughout the air, throughout the building, even bleeds outside of the walls a little bit. And if someone's in range to receive that signal, they can attempt to interpret it. So there's lots of security needs to address within a wireless network. Now, in order to stop some of the attacks that can take place within our wireless network, we're going to need two major things: authentication and encryption. Now, first off, authentication. Authentication is the ability to make sure or prove that you belong to the network and you have access to that network, right? So you are where you belong. So rogue devices cannot access the wireless network. We need some type of authentication so that, let's say we had two users, Bill and Susan. Bill's not allowed on the network and Susan isn't. How can I tell the difference between Bill and Susan in this wireless infrastructure? That is the purpose of authentication, and we're going to talk about that a little later. But even if I do that, even if I'm aware that Bill can't get on and Susan can, I need some type of encryption, don't I? I need some way to modify the data so that when Susan is sending that data through the air, through the thin air, through radio waves, that Bill just can't sit there with an antenna and grab all that data and take a look at the information that's being passed along that wireless network. So we need some way to make that data unreadable to anyone but Susan and the wireless network. That's where encryption comes in. And there's many different ways we use encryption in wireless. We're going to dive into that in a tiny bit. But I wanted you to know we need authentication and we need encryption. And these are put in place by different standards that we apply to our wireless environment.